Hey, what's up? This is Scott with Level Up Tutorials, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you how we can create a basic 2-column layout in our first website. So let's get going on that right now. So in the last video, we had this section and we had this aside, which is our sign up area right here. And we want this aside to actually show up in a single column on the right hand side of our page. So we want this to be a basic 2-column layout where you have one main column, which is going to be this section here, and one less important sort of sidebar column where we can throw a whole bunch of stuff in here. Now, making a layout like this is pretty easy. So if you remember at the top here, we had our header. When we wanted something to go far to the left and far to the right, we just floated them far to the left and far to the right. Well, we can go ahead and do that with these sections and asides here as well. So let's go ahead and name this class for our section here. And we can call this main-call. And now let's go ahead and copy this class into our aside. And we'll say this is sidebar. -call. Okay, and call just means column. And naming conventions can certainly be changed. Since this is our first website, we don't need to worry about too much about class naming conventions at this point. So let's head to our CSS and let's write some CSS here. We can first use our main column, and the main column we're going to say float, and we're going to float this left. So now we want this to actually be width of 70%. So instead of a pixel value, this is going to be taking up 70% of its parent. All right, now let's do the period sidebar column. And since we want this to be on the right side, we can say float right. Now it's important to know you could also say float left for this, because a float left is still going to pull this out of the document flow, and since we're going to be taking up 100% of the width here once this is all done, it really shouldn't matter. However, just because this is a left and right thing, we'll leave this as float right. So here we can say 30 pixels. Okay, like so. So the sidebar is going to take up 30%, the main column is going to take up 70%, and let's just go ahead and add a background of something like, I'm going to do a dark 333, and then from here I'm going to say color FFF. FFF is white, 333 is a dark gray. So let's go ahead and refresh our page, and as you can see, we now have the billboard, we have our left column, and we have our right column. Upon inspecting this, let's go ahead and inspect. You can see that this takes up 70%. And this takes up 30%. I'm actually going to change those color values. We can actually make this something more along the lines of what the billboard is doing. We can leave the color as black, but just change the background to a light gray. And just like that, I'm going to do the opposite for the billboard itself. I'm going to make the background 333, and I'm going to make the color in it FFF. This way, the billboard now sticks out a little bit more, the sidebar sticks out less, and it's just a little bit more even feeling, right? But we have some issues here. One of our big issues here is that the sign up right here, it goes directly to the edge of our sidebar here, and that doesn't look great. We don't want this to be directly pushed up against this line here. So one of the ways we can do that is by adding some padding to this aside. Now padding is going to just sort of push everything inwards. So let's go ahead and add 5% padding on this sidebar. However, I'm going to add 20 pixels of padding on the top, 5% on the left and right, and 20 on the bottom. Now, you'll refresh, you can see this has quite a bit more space here, but there's some really funky stuff going on. Our footer content is now pushed up here, our things don't line up, and if you hover over this, you'll see that this is now quite a bit wider than it was. In fact, if you look at these two highlighted areas, you can see very clearly that these puzzle pieces don't fit together. So one of the reasons that is because by default, padding adds to the width. So here we have 30%, we're using 5 and 5 on the left and right. However, that makes it actually 40%. because the padding is being added to the width. Now there's a way around that, which we can cover in later videos using a new technique. However, for right now, this is the standard way the box model works, so we want to make sure we have a good understanding of that. So by changing this width from 30% to 20, we can now add it up correctly by saying 5 plus 5 plus 20 equals 30 plus 70 equals 100. Refresh, and we now have some good looking padding in here. And we now have some padding in here, but it maybe looks like it's a little too heavy. So let's come back to our Sublime text and let's actually change this to 2.5%. And now we can change this width to 25%. Refresh it, and that looks a bit better. And that looks quite a bit better. So we now have our main content area, we now have our sidebar, we've added some padding, and we've learned a little bit about the box model. Now in the next video, we want to show you how you can put a wrapper around all of this content and then center that content. So that wrapper will be a given width, so that way when the page is this wide, our content doesn't shoot out so far apart. It'll only be maybe like 90% of the width of the window itself, but that div will be centered. So we're going to be centering a div in the next video. As always, this is Scott with Level Up Tutorials. If you have any questions, leave a comment in the video or hit me up at Twitter or Facebook at Level Up Tutorials. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.